I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're delving into the compelling narrative of Edgar Doleman's Arlen's Gun. He is taking us into the harsh realities of the Vietnam War through the eyes of Arlen, an alienated young man from Baltimore. His journey, marked by self-isolation and harsh combat experiences, ultimately leads him to discover the power of brotherhood as a beacon amidst all the chaos and survival. We are delighted to have Edgar join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel. Edgar, thank you so much for joining us here today. I almost called you Arlen, but good to see you today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great. Loved your book. It's kind of autobiographical or very autobiographical. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the story is I never knew a man like Arlen, except when I commanded a basic training company. And I could see in that process, which is a much simpler one than going to actual combat, how some kids, many kids, most kids actually, who came from really poor backgrounds, whether they were in Appalachia or Baltimore, got rid of a lot of their problems and became much more mature, just going through that process of basic training and learning to rely on each other. So that was kind of my model for Arlen. Because for many kids, one of the things war does to people is it either breaks them or it makes them. Mm. And I had a sergeant once who was an alcoholic, and he kept getting caught and being busted back and getting caught and being busted back. And one day the cops brought him into me, and I was going to punish him. And my senior sergeants came to me and said, "Please don't do that." "Why not?" "He's got the Medal of Honor. He won it in World War II. But in that sense, it broke him because he could never cope with life after that." And after I came back from Vietnam, I was asked to go up and give a talk up in Long Island. And I met a young man there who also had the Medal of Honor. But he wasn't broken. He had survived a very self-sacrificing act. He threw himself on a grenade to save his comrades, but somehow he survived. And he just felt that at that instant that God had put him there for that purpose. And so he was capable of healing, not just physically, but healing mentally from the trauma, whereas that aging sergeant had never been able to heal. So those are sort of two different things that happen to people in combat and how they get through them. And a lot of what I saw in my mind was what sort of ultimately amazed me about your average soldier was that they were capable of giving everything for their comrades, but also capable of being extremely compassionate to both comrades and enemy. And there were a lot of that doesn't show up in Arlen's Gun, but I tried to portray the different characters, the different responses, and the different levels of leadership that you got. You know, not everybody's a great leader. Yeah. Some of them weren't.
Tell us a little bit about who gets the Medal of Honor. I know a lot of people who aren't familiar with the military and how it works might have heard of the honor, but this is for someone who has gone above and beyond in a combat situation, correct?
Yes. You have different levels of medals for valor, starting with the Bronze Star, the Silver Star, the Distinguished Service Cross, and ultimately the Medal of Honor. So the Medal of Honor is for the most extreme or inspiring examples of courage. Sometimes it's repetitive courage, like in the movie We Were Soldiers Then. One of the helicopter pilots ultimately got the Medal of Honor because he kept volunteering to go in and go in and go in and go in. And there's one scene in Arlen's Gun where the weather sucks and they've got these seriously wounded people, and they can't get medical evacuation. Finally, they get a call from someone, and they realize from the call sign, hey, this is the medical evacuation helicopter battalion commander. And he's the guy who chooses to fly up the road under the clouds, right where the enemy can see him, to go pick these guys up who need to be picked up. And that comes from an actual experience of what to me is the one type of courage of saying, okay, they need it, I got to go do it.
Yeah. What do you hope readers get out of this book? Why did you decide to write about the Vietnam War now?
Well, that's hard to say, because in a way I probably don't really remember. I thought of, the first impulse was to write about the gun itself.
Right.
Because at one point in the Vietnam War, I had made use of that type of gunship. And the firepower of that gunship was, when you see it, and it's there for you, is incredibly awesome. It's almost supernatural visually.
Yeah.
And but then I realized it wasn't the gun. It was the people around it, the people who used it, and the people who survived because of it. And that made me want to put a man behind the gun.
Yeah.
So I picked Arlen.
Right.
Made him up. And other things were actually taken from reality. So one part of me that's in there is there's this major who's an advisor to the Vietnamese unit, and he gets misplaced and ends up clearing this road through the jungle and bumps into an engineer unit. Well, that was me.
Right.
And there really was an old French fort that had a heavy artillery battery in it that got attacked by a very large enemy force. And I knew the guys in there. So a lot of the incidents and events are based on things that actually happened. I just put them together in a completely different story.
Let me mention the gun. The gun is on the cover of your book, at least one of the versions of the cover of your book. And it really is an impressive weapon. When you look at it, stainless steel, it appears to be, obviously carrying very large rounds of artillery. It's impactful. Yet we live in a society where, even though this is the truth, and this is the weapon that was used during Vietnam War and probably wars ever since, or similar type weapons, Facebook said, no, you can't have that on our screen. Doesn't that seem like we're hiding from the truth?
In many ways it does. And that's why the second edition sort of got rid of the gun.
Yeah. But you shouldn't have to, because it's Arlen's gun. It's in part a real life story. That's an actual weapon used. It was sanctioned by the US government. It was used against the Vietnamese people. I mean, why hide it? But I guess that's a topic for a different day. Do you have would you like to see this made into a film or a movie or a TV series?
I think it would and a number of people have said they thought it would make a good movie. It is a good story, and it's realistic. And it, to me, shows what men were really like then, and what they could be and what they could do. Oddly enough, one of my favorite characters barely shows up in that story. He's the road grader operator who's then left alone because his partner, who was his co-driver, got wounded. And he's not really part of that engineer platoon because he's attached to them to help fix the road. And he's a very quiet kid. And in one of the critical moments in the final battle, they're told to go retake the wall. So he stumbles forward with the other guys to help retake the wall. And he kind of gets lost, and a soldier I never named comes up to him and says, "Come on, let's go, buddy." And they get to the top of the wall, and an enemy soldier comes over. And the young man sort of tries to poke him away like he's shooing a fly away. He doesn't shoot, he just pokes. But he had a bayonet on his rifle, and he stabs the soldier in the throat. And the soldier falls back, and he lets go of the rifle, and his companion grabs the rifle from him. And he's out of ammunition, so he tries to fire with the young soldier's rifle, and he realizes he's never chambered a round. He just didn't do it. He's one of the, in World War II, something like 25% of the soldiers never fired their weapon.
Right.
Because they could just never get themselves to point at a human being and squeeze the trigger. And their companions just used them as an ammo supply. They didn't berate them or anything like that. So this soldier takes his weapon, gets around and fires it off, and they go back. But toward the end of the battle, the soldier who had been guiding him and being his companion gets himself wounded, and falls into this soldier's lap, and the soldier grabs the rifle, and he can barely make himself do it, but the enemy is there, and he just fires blindly, but it drives the enemy off, and both of them are saved. So you have that very timid, sort of gentle soldier, and you have the soldiers who can do their job, and they can still form a team. So anyway, that's why.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great film or a great series. You do have this juxtaposition of characters, like you mentioned, some very strong, some very intimidated by the situation. It reminds me a little bit of, I guess it was Full Metal Jacket. I'm not sure, but you had William Dafoe was the commander, and he was very, very strong, and he had to be.
Yeah.
I get all my Vietnam films mixed up between Born on the 4th of July, Platoon, and the others. I'll have to rewatch them, but this, I think, would be a unique tale for sure. The name of the book is Arlen's Gun. It is written by Edgar Doleman. It is a unique take on the Vietnam War. It takes a look at a young man from Baltimore and takes a look at his journey from self-isolation to harsh combat, and the fact that he learns about the importance of brotherhood along the way. Edgar, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.